Her family left her in front of the harvester's blades until a human finally noticed her. Twin suns hung above Marith for like silent white eyes, stripping color from the sky and hammering heat into the soil. The grain field stretched flat and endless, every stalk the same height, every row precise. It looked orderly from a distance. Up close, the land stank of machine oil and scorched chaff. Syrian knelt in the middle of it. Her knees sank into cracked dirt between the rails. Her wrists were cinched tight behind her spine with raw cord that cut the skin. Sweat ran down her arms, catching the dust. Her violet skin flickered with faint silver pulses under her collarbones. An involuntary biological reflex she couldn't stop. She tried to hold her head high, but her neck trembled from the strain. Her white hair clung to her mouth each time the dry wind shifted. She didn't look at the harvester yet. She could hear it, the low, steady whine of its engine as it accelerated down the rail, cutting grain like it had every hour of every day for years. It was almost at her. It wouldn't stop. It didn't care what was in its way. That was why they left her here. One clean solution. No blood for them to see. Her breathing sharpened. Her vision tunneled. She kept forcing her eyes wide, as if watching it come would make dying cleaner. Nigel Doran saw her before he knew what he was seeing. He was driving his field rover along the southern service berm, windows cracked to vent the heat. A crate of seed vials rattled against the dash. He was heading back to the dome after 8 hours of irrigation diagnostics. Clog valves, half-dead pumps, the usual. That was his job now. Xenobotanist and logistics scheduler for the Marith 4 outpost. Just one man, keeping the food grid alive, 5 harvest sectors from anyone else. It suited him. No distractions. No noise. He'd once been a Federation field scout. He never talked about it, but it was obvious in how he moved, economical, silent, always scanning. His eyes swept the field by habit, reading the patterns. Grain bent in the harvester's wake, then rose again. Predictable. Perfect. Then wrong. A shape broke the flow. A flash of pale movement against the glare. Small. Still. He frowned. Braked. The rover skidded. The harvester's speed readout on his wristband showed 32 kilometers per hour and climbing. He looked harder. Not debris. Not a tool. A person. His chest tightened. He didn't think. He acted. He slammed the rover in a park and hit the ground running. Heat punched in his back. Dust scraped his teeth. The harvester roared closer, blades screaming up to full speed. It was seconds away. "Hold still," he shouted. Not loud, just sharp enough to cut through the engine noise. Syrian's head jerked. Her eyes locked on him. Shock, then disbelief. Then nothing. She froze again. Nigel sprinted for the manual stop post on the berm. The red lever hung loose. The control cable had frayed through. The safety system was dead. He swore once, low, and vaulted onto the harvester's side ladder as it passed. Metal slammed his ribs. His boots caught the rung. He hauled himself up. The cab was sealed. No pilot to shut it down. He ripped open the service panel behind the operator bay and hit the mechanical kill switch. It jammed halfway. The blades didn't slow. He slammed his palm down again. Nothing. He yanked his belt knife and wedged it into the pivot. Steel shrieked. The lever dropped the rest of the way. The engine coughed and fell to idle. The blades began to spin down. The harvester didn't stop moving. Momentum carried it forward on sheer mass. Nigel let go, dropped from the ladder, hit the ground in a crouch, and ran flat out for her. She still hadn't moved. Her pupils had blown wide. She was locked up, body waiting to die. He hit her like a tackle, wrapped an arm around her waist, and rolled them both sideways off the rail path just as the machine screamed past. The wind off the blades slapped his face. A strip of her wrap tore loose and snapped against his cheek. Stalks exploded into shredded chaff where her feet had been. They landed hard on packed dirt. He rolled off her, gasping once, forcing his breathing back under control. His ears rang. The harvester groaned to a halt 20 meters away. He sat up, cut the cord binding her wrists. The knife was sharp, the cord split cleanly. She jerked her arms forward and clutched them to her chest, shoulders hunched. The skin around her wrists was raw and marked. She didn't rub them. She just stared at him, panting, eyes still wide but focused now. Calculating. You're clear, he said, voice steady. She blinked. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. She pushed herself upright without answering. Her legs trembled. She forced them straight. Tall, rigid, not broken. Nigel watched her for 1 second to be sure she'd stay standing, then stood too. His hands still trembled faintly from the adrenaline. He forced them still. You can walk, he asked. Yes, she said. Her voice was hoarse, rough-edged but solid. She scanned the wrecked soil where the machine had almost hit her, and she looked back at him. Why did you do that? Because you were there, he said. It was the only answer he had. She stared at him a beat longer, eyes unreadable, then turned her shoulders toward the berm. She moved stiffly, each step careful. He walked beside her, not touching, close enough to catch her if she fell. The rover's cabin stank of dust and old coolant. He opened the passenger door. She hesitated, then climbed in. He covered the seat with a folded blanket first, so she didn't have to sit on the cracked vinyl. She said nothing. Her breathing steadied. Nigel started the engine. The rover lurched forward. For the first kilometer, neither of them spoke. The twin suns burned above the glass. Chaff drifted through the open slit in the window and caught in her hair. She didn't brush it off. What's your name? He asked finally. Syrian, she said. Clear, flat, defensive. Nigel. He kept his eyes on the track. I work the grain sector. Keep the pumps alive. She glanced at him, quick and sharp. You're not a farmer. No, he said. Just the last one left here willing to do the job. Her jaw tightened. She turned back to the window. The dome rose ahead. Glass walls, steel ribs, sun-bleached from years of wind. His home. His whole world now. He didn't know what he'd just brought into it. He only knew he hadn't been able to drive past. Syrian didn't know why he saved her, but she was still breathing, and she hated that it felt like relief. The dome door sealed with a soft hiss behind them, muting the harsh wind outside. Cool, filtered air replaced the scorched dryness of the field. Syrian paused just inside the threshold, eyes darting across the space. Bare walls, a workbench lined with labeled containers, a compact kitchen block, a recessed bed along the far wall. Everything in the room looked sharp-edged and orderly. She stood very still, as if deciding whether this was shelter or a cage. Nigel shut down the rover from a wall console and removed his gloves. He saw her flinch at the sound of the locks engaging. It was subtle, but real. Her shoulders stiffened, chin raised half a degree. He deliberately stepped back from her line of escape. You're safe here, he said, calm and direct. The door unlocked from inside. Her gaze snapped to the door handle. She tested it. It clicked open smoothly under her palm. She shut it again without a word. Only then did her breathing ease a fraction. He moved to the sink, turning on the tap to rinse the grit from his hands. Sit if you want. Or not, he added quickly. He could feel her attention still tracking him, sharp as a scanner beam. I don't sit, she said. Her voice was clearer now, but tight, controlled. Her eyes flicked toward the single bed recessed in the wall, then back to him. She stayed standing. Nigel grabbed a clean towel from the shelf and laid it on the table, then placed a cup of chilled Orvan water beside it. Drink slowly. You're dehydrated. Syrian approached with deliberate steps. She didn't reach for the cup until he stepped away. She drank in small, measured swallows, the cords in her neck standing out, then set it down precisely. Her hand shook once and then went still. Up close, he saw her wrists were marked red and raw from the cord. He caught himself staring and looked away. There's a shower stall through there, he said, nodding toward a narrow door near the kitchen. It's clean. Water's hot. Her eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion flashing there, but she didn't argue. I'll go alone, she said. Of course. He stepped aside and busied himself at the workbench, giving her distance. She walked toward the stall without hesitation, but stopped at the doorway. She looked back once, as if to confirm he was still turned away, then shut the door halfway. The sound of running water filled the dome. Steam drifted out into the air. Nigel forced himself to focus on aligning the spare irrigation valve parts on his bench. He had a dozen repairs left on the northern line tomorrow, and the list grounded him. His pulse still ran high from the rescue. He replayed the image of her on the ground as the harvester bore down. The locked muscles, the unfocused stare. She hadn't fought. She hadn't even braced. She had been seconds from being erased, and she had accepted it. That stayed lodged in his chest like a weight. The water stopped. Silence stretched. He heard fabric shift, soft steps. When he turned, she stood in the doorway, hair wet and combed back from her face. She wore the black reclamation overall he had left on the chair. It hung loose at the legs, the sleeves tied at her waist. The zipper was open to her sternum, the fabric gaping slightly with each breath. Her silver skin flecks had dimmed to a soft, low glow. Her posture was straighter now, though her eyes still scanned the room as if plotting escape routes. He kept his voice neutral. Hungry. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He cooked without speaking, keeping his movements visible and unhurried. Draxon mushrooms sizzled in the pan, releasing a sharp, earthy smell. He ladled in Varan root broth, stirred in coarse salt, and served it with pieces of dry Zyran bread. He set her bowl on the table and stepped back. Syrian sat this time, not relaxed. Her spine remained straight, shoulders square, but she sat. She ate efficiently, eyes flicking up to him between bites. When she finished, she set her spoon across the bowl, perfectly aligned. A small, precise act that told him she had been raised in ritual discipline. They left you there, he said. It wasn't a question. She looked at him. Something flashed behind her eyes, anger, shame, both. They said I shamed them. They said I had no place anymore. Her voice stayed level, but her hands curled slightly against her thighs. Nigel didn't push for details. He knew exile when he heard it. They thought the machine would do their work, he said. They didn't want the blood. Her jaw clenched. They wanted nothing, like I was never made. She didn't blink. Her voice was cold, but her fingers trembled once on the table before she forced them still again. You're not nothing, he said. Quiet. Factual. Her eyes flicked him, fast, sharp, studying him. He saw her trying to decide if he meant it or if it was just something humans said. She looked away first, back to the empty bowl. You didn't have to stop, she said after a pause. I know. You could have driven past. I know that too. The air hung heavy between them. Not hostile. Tense. New. She stood. I will sleep here tonight. Tomorrow I leave. All right, he said. He didn't argue. He picked up her bowl and turned toward the sink. She hesitated in the doorway of the bedroom niche. You won't stop me? No. Even if I walk back into the field. He faced her. If that's where you want to die, I won't stop you. But I'll ask you not to. She stared at him a long moment, eyes unreadable. Then she turned, stepped into the niche, and lay down with her back to him. Nigel stood in the dim light of the dome, listening to the soft hiss of the air filters. His hands rested on the counter, knuckles white. He'd saved her life, but he wasn't sure yet if she believed it was worth saving. And for the first time in years, the quiet of the dome felt fragile, like something alive had entered it, something that might not stay. The dome was silent except for the hum of the air filters. Morning light leaked through the thin window strips, laying pale lines across the floor. Nigel was already awake. He had been lying still for over an hour, listening. Syrian's breathing from the bedroom, niche had stayed steady and slow through the night. That felt like progress, even if she had turned her back to him and hadn't moved since. He rose quietly, careful not to wake her, and moved through his morning routine with practiced economy. Coffee first. Furlan seed grounds crushed by hand, boiled in the small induction pot until the air filled with a bitter, earthy scent. While it brewed, he reviewed the diagnostics panel on the wall. Sector 9's pump pressure was dropping again. He'd have to check the filters before noon or risk losing a week of irrigation. He rubbed at his eyes and tried to push down the familiar tension that came every time the system slipped. There was no one else left to maintain it. He was the last man on this grid. Behind him, fabric shifted. He turned slightly. Syrian was sitting up on the edge of the bed niche, hair tangled around her shoulders, the black reclamation overall still on from last night, half-zipped. Her gaze swept the room quickly, like she had to confirm it was still the same space she'd fallen asleep in. When her eyes found him, her shoulders straightened, posture snapping back into the rigid control she'd worn yesterday. You didn't leave, he said, voice low and even. Not yet, she answered. Did you sleep? Yes. A short pause. It was quiet. He nodded once and poured 2 cups. He set one near her on the table without looking directly at her, then went back to his. She watched the steam curl off the surface before lifting it. She didn't sip. She held it between her palms as though testing its heat. Her eyes stayed on him. You live here alone, she said. Yes. For how long? For years. He leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. After the collapse, most left. Someone had to keep the system running. She tilted her head slightly, assessing. You stayed to watch plants. I stayed to feed people who can't get here, he said, even if they've forgotten who grows their food. Something flickered across her expression. Not sympathy, recognition. She took a cautious sip. The bitterness hit her tongue, and she set the cup down, lips tightening briefly before she masked it. She stood and walked toward the glass wall that faced the fields. The harvester that had almost killed her yesterday sat parked at the far rail, its blades clean now, reset by the overnight drones. The sight froze her mid-step. Her shoulders locked. Nigel noticed the way her fingers twitched once before she caught herself. It won't move unless I tell it to, he said. He kept his tone neutral, informational, the way he spoke to field crews about weather systems. I know what they are, she said. Her voice was flat, but her stance stayed rigid. I know how precise they are. Precision doesn't make them merciful. That's the point, she said. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly against the golden field beyond. He wondered what she saw when she looked out, whether she saw a machine or the place she was supposed to die. Do you want to come outside while I check the trench valves? He asked finally. Or stay here? She glanced back, eyes narrowing slightly. You're asking? I don't order people, he said, even if they don't know where they belong yet. Her jaw tightened, but after a moment she gave a small nod. I'll come. She followed him barefoot out the dome's airlock. Heat slammed into them immediately, dry and sharp. The smell of sun-baked grain wrapped around them. She stayed close, her eyes moving constantly, scanning the ground, the horizon, the machines. Not fear, calculation. He recognized it. He used to do the same thing when walking into hostile terrain. They stopped by the main trench where the irrigation line ran under the soil. Nigel knelt and opened the maintenance hatch, pulling out a clogged filter. Grit crumbled off in his hands. Syrian crouched beside him without being asked, silent. She watched every motion of his hands. You know how these work? He asked. I know they keep the field alive, she said. My family never showed me the rest. Families like yours usually don't, he said quietly. Her eyes flicked to him sharply, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she reached out and held the new filter steady while he seated it back into place. Her hands were steady now. The silver flecks beneath her skin pulsed faintly in the sun. While he tightened the bolts, he asked, Why do they call you Defiant? She froze. Not visibly, but he felt it. Her body went still, her breath caught once. I told them no, she said. The words came slowly, like she was pushing them out through locked teeth. They wanted me bonded. I refused. Nigel looked at her. She stared down at the pipe. Her jaw was clenched, so hard a muscle twitched in her cheek. That's not defiance, he said. That's choice. They said it was betrayal, she said. Her voice cracked faintly, the first crack he'd heard in it. He closed the hatch gently. Then they don't deserve your loyalty. She stayed crouched, silent. Wind moved her hair across her face. She didn't brush it away. After a moment, she rose and stepped back from the trench. Her spine was straight again, but something in her eyes had shifted, less guarded, more unsettled. They walked back to the dome in silence. Inside, the cool air closed around them again, and the tension drained from her shoulders like she'd been holding her breath for hours. She looked around the space once more, slower this time, as if committing it to memory. I will not stay, she said finally. I didn't ask you to, Nigel said. Her gaze lingered on him. But you want me to? Yes. She didn't answer. She walked past him toward the bedroom niche, stepped silent on the floor, and disappeared inside. Nigel stayed standing at the workbench, staring at the wall, hands braced on the edge. He knew she might still walk out at dawn. But for the first time since he found her on the rails, she had told him something true. That was a start. Evening came early on Marith 4. The twin suns dipped behind the horizon one after the other, leaving a thin orange line and a sudden drop in temperature that always felt too sharp, like the world had been emptied of sound. Nigel lit the low strips along the dome walls. Soft amber light washed over the metal surfaces, warm but sterile. The fields beyond the glass darkened to shadowed gold. Syrian emerged from the bedroom, niche barefoot, hair dry now and loosely braided over one shoulder. She had zipped the reclamation overall halfway, just enough to keep it from slipping down. Her movements were quieter than earlier, but still alert. Nigel noticed it immediately. The way she stayed just beyond arm's reach, the way her eyes flicked to the door and ceiling vents like she was still calculating escape paths. She paused near the workbench and looked at the rows of label containers. "Why do you keep them so clean?" she asked. "Because this place breaks down fast if I don't," he said, still writing data logs on his wrist console. One loose part gets lost in the dust, and something stops working. Out here, one broken system can ruin the whole grid. She traced a fingertip along the bench edge, eyes on the neat labels. "You don't trust chaos. I've seen what it does." He didn't look up. "I used to work in it." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "Military," she said, not as a question. He exhaled through his nose. "Field scout. Years ago. You don't move like a farmer." "I'm not one," he said. "Just the last one left willing to do it." For a moment, the dome stayed quiet. The faint hum of the air system filled the space between them. She studied him longer than before. Not like she was searching for weakness, but like she was testing if he would keep being the same man from hour to hour. He stayed focused on his log until she stepped away from the bench and tore the glass wall. The Harvester sat parked on its far rail, its status lights dark now. She stood in front of the glass, arms crossed, watching it. Nigel saw her posture tighten again, a flicker of tension through her shoulders, the way her breathing shallowed. She hadn't gone near the machine's path since yesterday. He could see the question rising in her, the one she hadn't asked since he pulled her out. "Why did you stop?" she said suddenly, still looking at the Harvester. "You could have let it happen." He set the console down. "Because I could stop it. That's not a reason. It's the only one that mattered in the moment." She turned to face him fully, expression unreadable. "You didn't know me. I didn't need to." Something in her eyes flickered, doubt, or maybe something closer to confusion. She looked away first, back to the dark field. "You risked your life. For someone your world wouldn't even see." He didn't move from where he stood. "Then they're blind." That landed between them like a weight. She didn't answer. She stood still long enough for condensation to blur her reflection on the glass. When she finally turned, her expression had hardened again, back to that disciplined mask, but her hands stayed unclenched at her sides. Nigel pushed away from the counter. "You should eat," he said. "You burned through everything you had yesterday." "I'm not hungry." "You are. You just don't want to owe me." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue when he started cooking. He worked methodically, dicing red Zyron tubers, searing them in a shallow pan with seed oil, adding a handful of dried, torn greens from the shelf. She sat at the table, watching him like she still hadn't decided if he was dangerous or just strange. When he placed the bowl in front of her, she hesitated only a moment before eating, slow and controlled. "You've done this before," she said quietly. "Rescued people. Lived with someone broken." He paused, hand still on his own bowl. He didn't answer right away. "I've seen people break," he said finally. "Most stay that way." She studied him over the rim of her spoon. "And you think I won't? I think you might not want to." That silenced her. She set the spoon down carefully. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, not quite relaxed, but closer. He didn't press it. He cleaned their bowls and set them on the rack while she sat still at the table, eyes distant, fingers resting lightly on the wood as if anchoring herself. When he turned back, she was watching him again. "You really stay here alone?" she asked. "No one checks on you?" "Not in years. The outpost sends supply drones. That's it. No one talks to you. No one who needs to," he said simply. Her mouth moved like she almost smiled but didn't. "And you wanted me to trust this place." I wanted you to survive the night, he said. Trust is your decision. She stood, not abrupt, measured. Her braids swung lightly over her shoulder as she walked past him toward the bedroom niche. Halfway there, she stopped and looked back. Her voice was lower when she spoke. I didn't freeze because I wanted to die, she said. I froze because I thought maybe it wouldn't hurt. Nigel met her eyes. I know. She studied him for a moment longer, like she needed to confirm he actually meant it, then turned and disappeared into the shadows of the niche. Nigel stayed, standing alone under the dome's soft light. The silence wasn't empty this time. It felt suspended, waiting. For the first time since the field, he let himself think about the truth. If she walked out tomorrow, the dome would feel cold again. And if she didn't, he wasn't sure what the place would become. Dawn broke as a pale band behind the horizon, bleaching the gold from the fields. The dome's environmental system clicked softly as it shifted from night cycle to day. Nigel was already dressed, boots laced, tools clipped to his belt. He moved with quiet precision, packing diagnostic equipment into the rover's storage cradle. He had 3 irrigation valves to inspect before the suns climbed high enough to make the soil heat shimmer. He worked automatically, but his eyes kept flicking toward the bedroom niche. Syrian hadn't stirred. He told himself he didn't care if she was gone when he returned. He didn't believe it. The thought sat like a stone in his chest, heavy and immovable. She had said she wouldn't stay. She had said it more than once. And yet, she had not left in the night. He wasn't sure if that was hope or hesitation. A soft sound stopped him. Bare footsteps. He turned. Syrian stood just outside the niche, rubbing her eyes with the heel of her hand. The reclamation overall was still tied at her waist, the torso hanging loose and half-zipped. Her long white hair was unbraided, must from sleep. She blinked at the dome's soft morning light as though it hurt. You get up early, she said, voice rasped and low. Work starts before the heat, he answered. Easier that way. Her eyes moved to the open door of the rover, to the gears stacked inside. Where? Sector 9. Valves need clearing. She hesitated. You do all of it alone. Yes. That's inefficient. I'm still alive, he said. And so is the grain. She looked at him like she wanted to argue, then closed her mouth. She crossed to the table and sat, folding her arms on the surface. Her silver skin flecks were faint now, barely visible. He wondered if they dimmed from exhaustion or something else. She watched him load the last of the tools, silent but not tense like before. More uncertain, like she hadn't decided what her place was here, or if she wanted one. Eat, he said, setting a bowl of warmed larnberry porridge and a cup of Orvan water in front of her. She added suspiciously, You made this. Yes. Why? Because you'll need it if you come outside. Her gaze snapped up at that. You're asking me. I'm giving you the choice. A faint crease appeared between her brows, then smoothed. She picked up the spoon and ate without comment, movements controlled and measured. He said nothing, letting the silence sit. When she finished, she pushed the bowl away, stood, and walked to the rover. If I come, I don't carry tools, she said. I watch. Deal, Nigel said. Heat rose off the soil in shimmering waves by the time they reached the trench. The field stretched endless around them, stalks stiff and brittle in the early light. The harvester sat idle on the far rail, its blades folded in, but Syrian's gaze tracked it anyway as they passed, a quick flick of her eyes like a reflex she couldn't kill. Nigel parked at the trench's edge and jumped down. Dust puffed around his boots. He opened the service panel with a click of old metal and knelt, pulling out the clogged filter. It was caked with fine sand, damp at the edges. He scraped it clean with slow, steady movements. Syrian crouched near him, arms resting loosely on her knees. Her eyes followed every step. No drones to do this. There were, he said. They stopped coming. Why didn't you leave? Someone had to stay. That's not an answer. It's the one I chose. She studied him quietly. He kept working, but he could feel her eyes on him, sharp and assessing. Not hostile, curious in a way she seemed to be fighting against. As he bolted the new filter into place, he said, Yesterday, you said they wanted to bond you. She stiffened slightly. He kept his eyes on the bolt. Was it forced? Yes, she said after a long pause. Her tone was flat, but her fingers dug briefly into the fabric tied around her waist. They call it tradition. I call it removal. Nigel tightened the last bolt and closed the panel. They called it defiance. They called it betrayal, she corrected. They said refusing meant I thought I was above them. Maybe you were, he said. That made her look at him sharply. He met her eyes. There was no challenge in his tone, just quiet certainty. After a long moment, her shoulders loosened by a fraction. She stood and stepped back from the trench as he packed his tools. The sun had climbed high enough to burn the air pale. Heat shimmered over the stalks. Nigel climbed into the rover. Syrian hesitated for 2 seconds, then followed without being asked. They returned to the dome in silence. The cool air hit them like a wall as the door sealed behind. Syrian let out a slow breath she probably didn't realize she'd been holding. She untied the sleeves from her waist and shrugged out of the overall's upper half, leaving it hanging loose as she walked to the glass wall. The harvester was visible again from here, distant still. You trust machines, she said quietly. I trust them to do exactly what they're built to do, Nigel said. Nothing more. And me? She asked, still watching the field. He didn't answer immediately. He unclipped the tool pouch from his belt and set it on the counter. I'm still deciding, he said finally. She turned her head, just enough to glance at him. So am I. Her voice was calm, almost steady, but her hands curled briefly at her sides. He saw it and said nothing. She left the window and disappeared back into the bedroom niche, silent as smoke. Nigel stayed at the counter, staring out at the distant rails. He didn't know if she'd still be here tomorrow, but she'd chosen to come back from the field with him instead of walking away. That was the first decision she'd made that wasn't about survival. And that, he realized, was exactly why it mattered. The dome stayed quiet for most of the afternoon, but the air inside had changed. It wasn't the temperature. Nigel kept it at a steady 23 degrees. It was the weight. Syrian no longer moved like someone passing through. She drifted between the window and the workbench, silent, observing everything as if building a map of his routines, his habits, his vulnerabilities. He let her. He knew better than to box in something that still wasn't sure if it wanted to stay alive. By late shift, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a disassembled valve laid out in front of him, metal pieces sorted in neat arcs. Syrian leaned against the wall nearby, arms folded, her eyes fixed on his hands. He could feel the precision of her gaze like a steady line across his knuckles. She hadn't spoken since they came back from the trench. Finally, she broke the silence. You live here every day like this? Yes. You never leave. I send harvest tallies to the outpost twice a month, he said without looking up. That's as close as I get. And no one ever comes? Supply drone once a quarter, he said, sliding a gasket into place. Otherwise, just me. Why? He tightened a screw. Because if I leave, the grain dies. People on the outer settlements starve. And because he paused, not liking how the next part felt to say aloud. I don't know where else I'd go anymore. Syrian didn't react for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. I know that feeling. He glanced at her then. She didn't look away. Her posture was still guarded, but her expression wasn't blank anymore. He could see fatigue underneath, deep, anchored, the kind that took years to grow. You weren't just left in that field, he said, tone even. They planned it. Yes. They expected you not to fight. I didn't, she said. Her eyes stayed locked on his. I froze. That's not weakness. It looked like it. To them, maybe. Not to me. Something flickered across her face. Uncertain, like the words landed in a place she didn't want anyone touching. She broke eye contact first, pushing off the wall. I should wash, she said. I smell like dust. There's clean towels on the rack. She walked away without another word, bare feet soundless on the polished floor. He watched her disappear into the wash stall, then let out a long breath and leaned back against the wall. He hadn't realized until then how taut the air had been between them all day, like waiting for something to break or spark. Water hissed on behind the stall door. Steam drifted across the dome, softening the sharp edges of the space. Nigel stood, packed away the valve parts, and set a fresh thermal shirt on the chair near the niche. He didn't know if she'd take it, but it was warmer than the reclamation overall and softer on skin still rubbed raw from cord. When the water stopped, silence returned like a held breath. The stall door opened. Syrian stepped out, damp hair loose down her back, droplets tracing along her collarbones and vanishing into the open front of the overall. She caught him watching, and for the first time, she didn't flinch or scowl. She just held his gaze steadily, expression unreadable, then crossed the room and picked up the thermal shirt. She stood close as she unfolded it, close enough that he caught the clean mineral scent of the soap from the wash unit. Her eyes stayed down on the fabric as she spoke. "What happens when this all ends?" "This," he asked. "This farm. This dome. You." He hesitated. "Then it ends, and I go wherever's left. Would you go back to your people?" "They're not mine anymore." She looked up at that. "So you really are alone?" "Yes." She held his eyes for a long, quiet beat, then pulled the shirt over her head. It draped loose over her shoulders, hanging just to the tops of her thighs. She left the overall pooled at her feet forgotten. Her silver skin flecks glowed faintly now, like embers beneath her skin, more visible in the low light. She stepped past him and sat on the couch, folding her legs beneath her, damp hair trailing over the cushions. Her voice had softened, almost casual. "If I stay tonight, will you try to make me yours?" "No," he said, and meant it. Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "Strange human." "Disciplined human," he corrected. She watched him as he dimmed the lights, her expression unreadable but no longer sharp. The quiet that followed wasn't brittle anymore. It felt like something living had settled into the dome's air for the first time in years. Nigel stood there a moment longer, just watching her. She didn't look away. For the first time, he realized he wasn't waiting for her to leave. He was waiting to see if she would stay. The dome's lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow, set to night mode. Outside, the grain fields lay motionless under the twin moons, every stalk stiff and pale in the chill air. The temperature had dropped fast, the way it always did after sunset on Marith 4, but inside the dome the air stayed warm, dry, steady. Nigel stood by the glass wall, looking out at the silent rails where the harvester slept. He wasn't really watching the machine. His focus kept sliding back to the couch behind him, where Syrian sat cross-legged, drying the ends of her long white hair with the towel. She had changed into the black thermal shirt he'd left her. It hung loose around her shoulders, sleeves rolled halfway up her forearms, collar wide enough that the faint silver glow beneath her collarbones showed with every slow breath. She caught him glancing at her. She didn't look away this time. "You always keep the lights low at night," she said. Her voice was calm, quiet. "Less glare on the glass," he answered, turning slightly toward her. "And it's easier to sleep. Do you sleep well?" "Usually, unless something breaks." Her eyes flicked toward the workbench. "Something always could. That's how life works out here," he said. Her gaze returned to him. "How do you stand it, knowing you could lose everything alone?" He hesitated. "I don't think about losing it. I just keep it running." "That's not the same as living," she said softly. He let that sit. She was right, and they both knew it. He turned from the glass and walked toward her, slow enough not to shift the air too fast. She didn't move. He stopped near the couch, close but not touching. "What about you?" he asked. "What does living mean to you now?" Her fingers stilled on the towel. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she set the towel down on the armrest. "I don't know yet. Yesterday, I thought it meant dying on purpose. Today, it just means not being erased." Nigel crouched down so they were eye level. "You're not erased." "I was supposed to be," she said. Her tone stayed steady, but something tight flickered behind her eyes. "You're here instead," he said. "That matters." She searched his face like she was testing if he believed it. He didn't look away. Slowly, Syrian shifted. She slid her legs down from under her and let her feet touch the floor. Her knees brushed his arm where he crouched beside the couch. She didn't pull back. "Nigel," she said quietly, "if I stay, would you see me as yours?" "No," he said immediately. His voice stayed calm, even. "I'd see you as yours." Her lips parted slightly at that, as if caught off guard. The tension in her shoulders eased for the first time all night. She leaned forward, close enough that her hair brushed his forearm. Her voice was lower when she spoke again. I don't know how to belong to anything without disappearing inside it. Then don't disappear, he said. Just stay. She drew in a slow breath, steadying herself, and nodded once. Then, carefully, she reached out and rested her palm against his chest. The heat of her hand bled through the fabric of his shirt. His heart beat steady under her fingers. He stayed still, letting her decide the pace. Her touch lingered. Then she rose to her feet and stood in front of him, tall, the loose black shirt slipping off one shoulder. Her silver skin flecks glimmered faintly in the low light, pulsing with her heartbeat. I want to try, she said. Then stay, he answered. She stepped closer, close enough that her breath touched his cheek. For a second, she hesitated, one last measure of control. Then she leaned down and pressed her forehead against his. Their eyes closed at the same time, and the quiet in the dome stopped feeling like emptiness. Neither of them spoke again. He reached up and touched her waist, slow and steady. She covered his hand with hers, firm and sure, anchoring it there. When they finally lay down together on the couch, it wasn't desperate or rushed. It was careful, deliberate, chosen. Their bodies met with the same discipline they used to keep themselves alive, slow, focused, and without fear. Her skin was warm against his. His hands were steady on her. They didn't rush. They didn't break the silence. When it was done, they stayed close, tangled under the thermal blanket. Her breathing slowed against his chest. His arms stayed wrapped around her shoulders, holding her like something real, something he had no intention of letting vanish. Outside, the field stood silent under the twin moons. Inside, for the first time in years, the dome no longer felt like a place for one person. It felt like home. The first light of dawn crept across the floor in thin white bars, sliding slowly up the couch cushions. The dome's internal systems hummed as they shifted from night cycle to day, ventilation increasing, thermal strips warming slightly. Nigel opened his eyes before the alarms triggered, instinctively awake with the change in air pressure. Syrian was still asleep against him. Her head rested on his chest, her white hair tangled across his shoulder and the blanket, skin faintly glowing where it touched the early light. One arm was wrapped firmly around his waist, not loose or accidental, as if she had decided in her sleep that she wouldn't drift away again. Her breathing was slow, even steady. Nigel lay still, not out of hesitation, but because he didn't want to move her yet. He hadn't realized how sharply he'd been bracing these last 2 days until now, when the tension had gone out of her body and, with it, his. The dome felt different. Not quieter. Quieter was what it had always been. This was something else. Balanced. Alive. Syrian stirred. Her hand flexed slightly against his side, and her eyes opened halfway. They were clearer now, not guarded. She blinked at the light, then tilted her face up toward him. "You're awake early," she murmured, voice still rough from sleep. "I always am," he said softly. "Work starts soon." She studied his face for a moment longer, then shifted to sit up, pulling the blanket with her. The thermal shirt she'd worn was half unbuttoned, slipping from one shoulder, and she didn't bother to fix it. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture was calm, no longer rigid. "Do you still want me to stay?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Even if I can't be what I was supposed to be." "I don't need who you were supposed to be," he said. "Just who you are." She looked at him for a long time, her gaze steady and measuring like it had been in the field, but softer now, no edge in it. Finally, she nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Then I'll stay." Something inside him eased in a way he hadn't let himself imagine until now. He stood, pulling his shirt on from the back of the chair, and started the morning routine. Steam hissed from the coffee unit. He cracked a handful of dried Zyron bread over 2 bowls and poured heated larnberry porridge on top. The smell filled the dome, earthy, faintly sweet. Syrian joined him at the table, still barefoot, still wrapped in the blanket over her shoulders. She sat close enough their knees touched under the table. She didn't move away when they did. They ate in silence that felt nothing like the silence of their first meal. There was no tension in it now, no testing. a space that both of them were willing to share. When they finished, Syrian stood and walked to the glass wall. Outside, the grain field glowed faint gold under the early sun. The harvester sat far on its track, idle, its status lights off. She pressed her palm to the glass for a moment, then let it fall to her side. "This place could be something," she said quietly, "if you weren't alone in it." "I'm not," he said. She turned at that. He was still at the table, leaning back in his chair, watching her. The words had been simple, factual, and she seemed to realize it. Her mouth softened just slightly, like she was almost smiling but hadn't remembered how yet. He stood, collecting the bowls, and set them in the washer. "I have to check the Sector 11 filters today," he said. "You can come, or you can stay here." "I'll come," she said. "Not to help, just to walk beside you." "That's enough." They prepared quickly. She pulled her hair into a loose braid and zipped the reclamation overall back on, though she left the top half tied at her waist. He gathered the tools and sealed them in the rover cradle. When they stepped out of the dome together, the suns were climbing and the dry heat was rising in waves off the soil. They rode in silence across the berm road, the grain bending in orderly lines on either side. Syrian sat on the open step beside him, hair whipping behind her in the wind. She didn't look at the harvester as they passed it this time. She kept her eyes forward on the horizon. By midday, they had cleared 3 clogged filters and flushed the lines. She had said little, only handing him tools when he reached for them. But he saw the change. She didn't move like someone waiting for her moment to escape anymore. She matched her pace to his without thinking. When they returned to the dome in the afternoon heat, she walked inside first. Nigel sealed the door behind them. Cool air swept over their skin. She stopped halfway across the room and turned to him. "This is ours now," she said. He didn't correct her. That night, the dome lights dimmed as the suns fell. They stood together by the glass wall, side by side, watching the wind ripple across the grain. Her hand brushed his. He caught it gently and held it. She didn't pull away. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Syrian stayed. And for the first time in 4 silent years, the dome wasn't just a place to keep the grain alive. It was home.